Queensland Nichols directors?
Who wants to take this? John?
Sure.
John.
Thank you. So ASIC has a number of current inquiries concerning a range of issues in relation to Queensland Nickel. And in particular, we're working closely with the administrators of Queensland Nickel regarding the reasons of the collapse, whether there are any potential conflict issues with regard to senior officers of the company, issues around corporate donations. We've liaised with relevant regulators responsible for unpaid employee entitlements. We're looking at allegations around shadow directorships. We're looking at some issues around security interests that were taken close to the time of insolvency. And we're also looking at various issues around financial reporting. Now, the statutory obligation to investigate these issues rests initially with the administrators, and if they identify offences, they must report those to ASIC as soon as practicable. But we are making some independent inquiries into various of those matters, I suppose, just so that we are able to act quickly depending on the final outcome of whatever the administrators report.
Can we go through those elements then, please, Mr Price?
Sure.
The first one was the reasons for the collapse.
That's right. And in terms of the reasons for, the potential reasons for the collapse, it's still far too early to come to a concluded view on that. I would perhaps point to a couple of things that may be relevant. In an affidavit in relation to some separate litigation, a gentleman by the name of Mr Wolf, who's the Chief Financial Officer for a group of Palmer-related companies, indicated that some reasons for financial stress for Queensland Nickel included falling nickel price, and the price of nickel has fallen very, very substantially over the last little while. A related company, Mineralogy Pty Ltd, not being able to provide ongoing financial support as it had been able to do in the past because of litigation with some third parties, and also some failed attempts at bank support. There was an initial, the administrators held an initial meeting of creditors not so long ago, and they indicated some preliminary thoughts around the financial stress of Queensland Nickel that were pretty much consistent with what I've just indicated there.
Thank you. The second element you indicated were you were investigating conflicts within, did you say senior?
Conflicts of interest. So there are some suggestions that during potential to, I suppose, to put it in context, Queensland Nickel is one of a series of companies that have various links to Mr Palmer. So we just want to ensure that when decisions have been made, they have been made in the best interest of Queensland Nickel rather than any other factors coming into play.
So, Mr Price, I imagine then you look at who had what powers at certain times over a period of time, and there's been some commentary about that in the media.
Certainly, there have been a number of changes in terms of directorship, but we will be looking at who made particular decisions at what period of time and were they in the best interest of the company. And again, that's a strong focus of the administrators' analysis of the circumstances as well. We've been in very close contact with them.
And that relates also to your inquiry about shadow directors.
Correct.
I expect.
Correct.
So how do you go about investigating whether or not there have been shadow directors and, in fact, what those directors may or may not have done?
Well, the critical issue, I suppose, in terms of shadow directors is establishing whether there is actually sufficient evidence to indicate that someone has been acting as an officer of the company. And there are particular legal tests in terms of whether someone is a director. So what the law says is you're not only a director, it's not the case that you're only a director just because you're recorded on ASIC's register as a director.
Yeah.
So under the Corporations Act, anyone who makes or participates in making decisions that affect the whole or a substantial part of the business of a company, or anyone who has the capacity to affect significantly the company's financial standing, or anyone in accordance with whose instructions or wishes the directors of a company are accustomed to act, may in fact be a director. But it really does depend on the evidence, and that's the critical thing that the inquiries of the administrators will be focusing on in the not too distant future.
And you would have seen the commentary in the media about Mr Palmer using a pseudonym as his
Sure.
email account.
Sure.
How does that pan out in terms of your work?
Well, first of all, I think it's quite important to be aware that there is no, in terms of offences, and here I'm talking about criminal matters, using an alias per se, unless it's prescribed in specific cases, is not an offence.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there are exceptions to that. So, for example, you can't book a flight on an aeroplane using a name other than your own name.
Yep.
So that's a specific example where there's an offence. For ASIC's purposes, it becomes relevant to things like, has there been a false statement that's been lodged with us where a false, an alias has been used? So that there's no, the general rule is it's not a criminal offence to use an alias, but there are some specific exceptions, and so you need to go through all the facts and carefully analyse whether there's an issue.
And to this point in time, has ASIC received submissions, reports to this point in time that have used that alias?
Yeah, look, there has, in related court hearings, there have been some indications that there may have been aliases used, but we're still at early days in terms of our inquiries in this matter.
Thank you.